remittance column could be lower or nil, and you could have capitalization of exports, or you could have share swap, that is issuing your own shares to the shareholders of the foreign company. So if it is such a scenario, yes. Otherwise, remittance, if it's in one go, will be same as financial commitment.
Yep. So 5.6 form ODI reporting for restructuring. There is a restructuring of the capital employed by the Indian party. Loan is converted into equity, and loan is converted into an export advance. Let's look at the first case of loan is converted into equity. Now, we know that for the purpose of the outbound regulation, for the purpose of financial commitment, equity and loan are on the same page. So when actually RBI post investment of equity, RBI is indifferent whether the second round of investment is either equity or a loan. Therefore, in my experience, if you were to convert loan into equity, there should not be any problem at the RBI regulation level. You may just choose to write a simple letter that so and so was remitted under so and so ODI as loan, and it has got converted into equity, and you will have to follow the valuation notes. For example, if it is a JV, then the conversion will need to be at fair value. If it is your own wholly owned subsidiary, you may convert it at par, and now it is also very clear in the FAQs for the outbound regulation. Now the second issue is if the loan was to be converted into an export advance. Now this is a very tricky situation because you are changing a capital account transaction into a current account transaction. This is something which is not at least provided in any regulation, because even for giving an export advance there are again guidelines. When you know what kind of export advance that you're trying to talk about, that means you've given an advance and the party will give you. That means the wholly owned subsidiary is going to supply you something. It's going to be that way. So it's actually for the Indian company an import advance. If you classically look at it that way. So again, giving an advance for import by the Indian party, again there are regulations which I don't know whether are met, not met. So this is something which will need RBI approval. Converting loan into equity, no problem, doable. I don't believe you will be able to convert loan into export advance. If you were to do that, you will need specifically RBI approval. And as I said, converting loan into equity, valuation guidelines will need to be complied with depending on whether you are a JV, WAS, and the regular stuff that is involved in such cases.
To supplement that, on the first part, loan into equity, I think either the FAQs or the master circular now says a simple plain paper letter to RBI would be enough. So now they've expressly clarified. You just write to RBI that this is what we've done and this is the step we've taken, and that's good enough compliance. I think it's in the latest FAQ, but one of the two, either the FAQ or master circular, they've added this line. 5.7 transfer of shares. So an Indian part, yeah.
Regarding 5.5, the third question was the amount of remittance can be lower than the financial commitment. Is there any time period in which the financial commitment should be honored?
No.
So it can carry on.
Unlike FDI, where it says within 6 months you must issue the shares, there's nothing for ODI.
And if suppose we don't require that, then suppose we have taken the permission for 1 million and we just utilize for 1.6 million. Right?
It may be better to write to RBI through your AD. That this is what we propose to do. If you have any contrary view or whatever, write through your AD.
Sir, in addition to the gentleman point, if audit period is over, let's say I have filled the form ODI and I have used 31st March 2013 audited balance sheet and I have not fully utilized my financial commitment, and 31st March 2014 balance sheet has been conducted, the audit has been conducted, then banker asks revised statutory certificates in case the another year is on the problem. You are not actually.
Those are things from procedural angle, there are no clarity. So each AD follows his own, wisdom on that. But yes, there have been instances on that. 5.7 transfer of shares of a JV or a WOS from an Indian party to an Indian party. So this is an Indian party selling shares of a foreign party to another Indian party. What is the procedure and the remittance mechanism involved? Now here, because an Indian party is selling to another Indian party, the buyer obviously cannot pay in dollars or convertible foreign exchange. He has to pay in rupees, because you cannot pay in India to another person in dollars or in convertible forex. But both the seller and the buyer will have to file form ODI. Seller will file part 4 and the buyer will file part 1. Now the authorized dealer may ask you to file the ODI in as if converted forex. So assuming it was in foreign exchange, what would the figures be? So that is something which some authorized dealers have asked, that you take the convertible foreign exchange rate as of today and fill it up in that currency rather than only in rupees. But otherwise, the only compliance is ODI Part 1 and Part 4. And if the shares of the JV or WOS are unlisted, you would need a fair market valuation report based on the last audited balance sheet by a chartered accountant or a CPA for making the sale. And then you also need to look at whether there's a write-off or no write-off, because those conditions then under B1 or B2 will also apply. Write-off generally, I would look at it in dollar to dollar terms. I mean, there's no, again, clarity, but I believe if I invested 1 million, am I getting 1 million in dollar terms, or am I getting less than 1 million? Because if I get into foreign exchange conversion rate, then it throws up different permutation combinations at both ends.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a next issue again as to how you say there is a write-off, and whether it is a dollar to dollar or you sort of gain sometimes and you lose sometimes. But yeah, I think the better view that emerges is that it's a dollar to dollar benchmarking. Okay, going to the question number 5.8, meaning of financial service sector, regulation 7. So I think the question asked to pose is whether can you go to the meaning indicated in the FDI policy. Actually, in the section F in the statutory auditor certificate, there is a footnote, and they've actually defined insurance and a couple of other sectors as financial service sector. So it just mentioned insurance and I think
Mutual funds
and AMC. So there are 2-3 sectors which are given. But I think yes, to a certain extent you need not even go to the FDI policy, but in general the meaning of the term. So as accountants and as practitioners, we would typically try and put anything which is relating to financial services most appropriately. So I think yes, you have to go to the FDI policy meaning as well as the general guidance that is available vis-a-vis the sector as to whether it is a financial service sector or no, and then accordingly take a decision.
Yeah. That question also is.
No, there is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No. Complete it.
So, one of the conditions of financial service sector requires that an approval be obtained from a regulator in India as well as outside India. If these activities are not regulated outside India, whether the declaration from an Indian party is sufficient, well, it is not sufficient. Because the Reserve Bank in the financial service sector wants this sector to extend only to jurisdictions where that activity is regulated. So if there is any metrics where there is no regulator, then that kind of investment will need an RBI approval.
Yeah, I think 5.9 is again repetition of what Shabir Bhai did with. So you can move on to 5.10.
Yeah, so it says one of the conditions of the financial service sector is that it requires the approval of the overseas regulators. And if the activities are not regulated outside India, whether the declaration from the Indian party will suffice, the answer is no. We need to seek an approval from the RBI. Because right now the way the outbound regulations are worded, a regulated entity in India vis-a-vis regulated entity outside India, and that's how the parity works. If that parity is not there in that case, then that case will need approval of the RBI.
Here there have been instances of RBI taking a view that if you set up a company abroad for routing investment back into India, then it constitutes a financial services sector. So that is also something which you need to bear in mind. So if I set up an SPV abroad and that SPV has only no bona fide business, it is only for sourcing investment back to India, round tripping aside. So that's a larger question. But assuming it is possible under the round tripping and does not constitute, you also need to see whether that company constitutes an FSS. A company which is an SPV for making outbound is not an FSS, and if it has been clarified under the master circular, because they say when you want to make an investment through an SPV, comply with regulation 6. They don't say comply with regulation 6 read with 7. So had they presumed that SPV was also FSS, they would have said 6 read with 7. But if it is for rerouting into India, we have had instances where RBI has taken a view that this is a financial service sector. So to be cautious on that.
No, in fact, I would like to add over there that's really Akamka was a contrast to you as well. You go ahead with your question.
Yeah, is there any issue on multi-level SPVs overseas?
Yes and no. There's nothing stated in the RBI guidelines, but informally, whenever you approach RBI for several multi-level SPVs, they have raised objection. The Deputy Governor HR Khan is on record saying at a press conference that there is a need for reviewing the multi-level structures, because on one hand, multi-level structures create opacity, and on the other hand, multi-level structures permit you tax benefits. So we need to weigh in a policy which will allow both. But generally, informally, RBI always disapproves of multi-level.
Effective is something.
No.
Guarantee.
Yeah.
Guarantee, it says you can give to operating company or no. But can you have just investment? There have been cases where they have said no.
No, I think the guidelines, so I think in the FEMA 120, there is no provision for investing through an SPV. The SPV perhaps comes only from the circulars.
Right.
And they use the word a SPV, that means a single SPV. And they are very clear that multi-level SPV is not permitted. That's very clear. I don't think they've been right throughout trying to tell everybody, and they've even asked people to unwind.
Unwind, yeah.
Yes.
Indian Hotels is one example where they've often tried and they've been unsuccessful. For the Orient Express and other properties abroad, they've tried to create a multi-level structure and they've often been unsuccessful on that.
Sorry, so you feel?
Yeah, 5.9 was seen, this was a
Yeah.
repetition.
So I just wanted to add over here that there is a, one of the condition is, so, very interestingly, if you're setting up a new entity, if the regulator there in the overseas entity does not give you an in-principle approval, then you will always fail the test, even if you satisfy any other test.
Correct.
So that's a real chicken and egg situation, and we've been trying to explain to RBI that if I'm setting up a company, where will the regulator give an approval? And they have been asking for even an in-principle approval, and that's a real challenge. Because the other threes are okay, but the whole point is asking that overseas regulator to give an approval when you have not made an application, the entity is not in existence. So inevitably, the way I see it, you will fail that test and you have to go to RBI. In most of the cases where you are setting up a company, unless there is already an existing company regulated with the regulator and you are picking up some stake over there. So that's something which I thought I will highlight. All right, let me. So on round tripping, just one point I wanted to add. See, the outbound regulation also mentioned that the outbound investment has to be for a business activity outside India, and therefore we are investing in India back again. That test fails, and that's where they have been attacking people. That you really will not. So whenever you choose to make an outbound, it has to be all outside. You can't come back because the permission there. Yeah. So okay, fine. So maybe because Anup just mentioned, I thought so. That was a question. But maybe I thought we'll just clarify it. That once you've done an outbound, there is really no ability to come back to India from that. And I know this is going to cause a lot of heartburn. And many people may not have interpreted the regulation that way, but that's what the RBI seems to believe. That we are allowing you to do investment business outside India and not come back to India under whatever circumstances.
Unfortunately, there is nothing black and white for us. The only challenge or only positive which can come as differences, we have to prove that it's not an abusive round tripping. So if I can substantiate that the investment
No,
is
but
coming into
they are
it.
not making a distinction between abusive and non-abusive. It's your own imagination, that's how it is. They are not making that distinction.
But I just,
They may allow you on a specific application, that's a different thing. But right now, they are not making that distinction on their own.
Alright, no, so if I
So they may approve if it is non-abusive. We've got that approval in a couple of cases. But you will have to go and make that distinction, that you cannot assume when it's okay that way.
So because for example, if I set up a company abroad with minimum capital,
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
but with approval, they are permitting it. See,
With
if you look at all the AIM structures, the alternative investment management fund structures, they all are set up on the same mechanism. You set up a company in Isle of Man or Guernsey, raise money through a euro bond or an issue abroad and use it to buy property in India. If you look at Fortis, what they did is they set up a business trust in Singapore. They raised 500 million Singapore dollars from Singapore and other markets and bought all the hospital assets from Fortis India. Now that is nothing but round tripping, but it is done with approval. So if your money, there is a clear-cut nexus that what is going abroad is staying abroad and what is coming from abroad is not getting mixed up, then they are giving permission. But don't do it on your own accord. That's what he's saying is correct. But they are giving permission on such cases.
Yeah, but actually, in the fund structure, perhaps most of the cases the role is only of an asset manager. We have just taken a seed capital.
Right.
That's a very different model.
seed capital.
You are not technically economic owner of the benefits here. Therefore, that's a slightly different model. But pure round tripping is what you would look at, where there's only a one-to-one nexus. That would clearly not fit in within the regulation. Perhaps may not even appeal to the regulator.
Yes, definitely.
So this is purely the private equity industry who sort of takes a seed capital, because a fund will be created without that. The fund cannot be created unless the seed capital has gone in. Right. So 5.10 merger of Indian parties post overseas direct investment. So again here perhaps I'm a bit little unclear on the questions of Paresh where you may help here.
The question is like this.
Yeah.
Indian company has made an overseas investment when the criteria was 100% of capital.
Right.
And then the Indian company which has made investment is merging with the another Indian company, and the merged entity does not qualify for this 100% net worth criteria. So whether anything is required to be done or just keep quiet.
No, so the merged entity, perhaps one of the entity would be a loss-making entity.
Of course.
Therefore, you sort of. So in this scenario, I think so there are two questions here. One is, do you have to test the 100% condition again on the merger? If that's the first question, in my view, the answer is no, because the merger is only consolidation of entity. Whether something needs to be done, yes, you need to transfer the UIN. So I think in most practical cases, they will ask you to file that form ODI. Again, where you will have to give all the declaration as if the new entity is acquiring that investment. You have to file a divestment report perhaps for the entity which has gone off, because then they will lock off that. So that's a practical thing. I have at least come across 2-3 instances or a couple of instances where RBI has also approached it in a slightly different matter every time. But I don't think we have ever tested the 100% again, because it's just India to India transfer under a court approved scheme and under a merger.
It's a variation of the earlier question was to know that if the Indian party transfer the shares to another party, then what is required to be done? If the same thing is required to be done here, that the original Indian company files the form part D of this investment form, and the new company, which is a merged entity, it files part 1, then the part 1 it will not qualify for the automatic route. That's why the question is.
No, so Paresh, you're right, but this is since it's under a court approved scheme and it's consolidated. RBI is also as of now
Correct.
Under the court approval panel, they are accepting it, because you will not achieve anything by revaluing.
Right.
Because if it's the wider restructuring which is permitted under your corporate law.
Right. And the 100% limit definitely has to be checked when you made the investment.
Yeah.
There is an analogy which you can draw that when you give a guarantee, they say you look at the limits when you give the guarantee. But if it's a performance guarantee which is being invoked, you check the limits when you are invoking the guarantee. So that shows that only in the case of performance guarantee you check it again when you are invoking, not when you are giving. So in this case it is very clear, it's only when you gave it, that is the transferor company or the transferee, but not again on merger. And 5.13 is same question again, it's linked to what Shabir Bhai answered, so I won't go into that. 5.11, ODI by LLPs, is it a conscious decision or an oversight? It's definitely a conscious decision. RBI gets flew from the word LLPs, whether it is under the NBFC Act or whether it is under FEMA or whether it is under ODI. After a lot of time they have notified the FDI policy in LLPs. ODI is a conscious decision. Here again there is a deputy governor's speech that there is a need for a rethink on the LLP position as terms of ODI, but for the moment we are not in favor of allowing ODI by LLPs. So it's a conscious call. And they look at LLPs as a regulatory arbitrage mechanism because they are more concerned from the NBFC department standpoint. See, currently NBFC means companies only applies to companies, not to LLPs. And they are afraid if you use the LLPs, you bypass the NBFC RBI regulation route. So therefore the DNBS, the Department of Non-Banking Supervision, has an apprehension towards LLPs, and hence all RBI has an apprehension towards them.
So you say
Not in a hurry.
Yeah, that is a quite a irony because you have a partnership firm registered is an eligible Indian party. You have an LLP which is a much better vehicle as not forming part of the Indian party. That's the party all about. Okay. So let's go to the next question. Liquidation of a foreign company. So regulation 16, sale of shares is covered under the automatic route. There is no reference to liquidation. In case there is a liquidation and there is a loss, is any approval required from RBI? Well, as the thumb rule says, if you are doing any capital account transaction which is not stipulated in the regulation, please seek the RBI approval. So that's correct. If you are going to make a loss in the liquidation, it is better to approach the RBI, take their consent and then go ahead with the liquidation procedure. And if the approval to be obtained prior to the liquidation, where in my view you will have to apply before the liquidation.
I'd just like to here give one clarification. If there is a loss, yes, I do agree. But if there is no loss, if you look at part 4 of Form ODI, it refers to liquidation. If you look at the operational instructions to the AD, it refers to voluntary liquidation. Therefore, voluntary liquidation is a permissible mode provided there is no loss. But if there is a write-off, definitely you need to take prior RBI permission. And this is not there in the regulation, it's not there in the master circular, but it's somewhere inserted in part 4 and in the operational instructions. So
they have actually put divestment,
stroke, and the last stroke is voluntary liquidation.
So that's correct.
So,
that's the
therefore, if no loss, no approval.
Yeah, so that means if you are satisfying all the condition of the sale on liquidation, then perhaps the view is correct that there is no approval of RBI required. But if there is a loss,
Yeah.
you need an approval. Yeah.
The issue is that if liquidation is a forward-looking process in most countries, what will be the impact of RBI's agreement or disapproval in these circumstances?
No, so that is a very fundamental question. I mean, the issue is if you made a loss, you made a loss. RBI can't make a gain out of it. No? They are giving you only permission for write-off. I have lost money in the first place. So, I think, yeah, so the whole idea of RBI going through it is to make sure that there is nothing more than what you are stating and it's a genuine loss. If there's a genuine loss, we'll get your.
Can we
No.
just make a 30-day intimation with
No.
the 30 or we have to go for approval?
No, you'll have to go in. If there is a loss, you'll have to go in for another. Unless, you are under that sale with a loss, again also there are some conditionalities. If you satisfy those conditions, that's a different thing. But if the loss is not fitting in within the sale with the loss condition, then you need an approval.
Is it the same with loss or you still?
So there is now a specific clause which says that if there is a sale and there is a write-off, it is permitted subject to certain conditions. Some listed company, something, and net worth, all those 3-4 conditions are
That will
there.
apply to liquidation also.
That should apply to liquidation as well in my view. And if you are satisfying that, then perhaps you are better off. But still, I would say intimate in advance. Don't wait for the liquidation to get over. Intimate, because the liquidation process will take 6 months at least.
Yes, I will intimate to RBI.
But that, if you are fitting in within the sale with a loss, if not, you need prior approval.
Friends, it has become more than interactive. So we will not be able to get the trustees' time for all the questions. So I don't mind. You will be doing at your own peril. So because going to the last level will be difficult to accommodate. But it's up to you. So can I request all of you to just listen to the brain trustee for all the questions and we go home with their replies being written down rather than going further. I'm up to you. Because we have to close sharp at 6:50. We cannot go further. So, it's up to you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
5.13 you answered, so you can take up 5.14.
We are making sure that I'm cold enough. Alright, so 5.14, the revised criteria of net worth. No, so this I think now is reasonably clear in the circular that if you are investing out of EFC, then the 100% ceiling will not apply. I don't think there is anything that needs to be done. If you are investing out of EFC or EDR, GDR, then to that extent you can go above the 100%. I think that's very clear in the circular which came in. It's also very reasonably clear in the master circular. So I don't know if there's anything beyond that, Pareshbhai, in this question, because that's a quite, and again this question is not very happily worded. I think it has got mixed up with 263, which is a notification for the LRS category. So I don't know what is, it's not applicable only to this 400%. So I mean, the question seems to be a mixed up, but if the simple question is for an Indian company, if you want to invest more than 100% of your net worth, and if you have an EFC account or an ADR, GDRPC, you can want to go up above the 100%, the answer is yes.
5.50, branch agency of a person resident in India. When do you have to bring back the funds? Now here, Circular 33 of 2007 gives a concessional mechanism for IT companies. But first we need to go to the original circular, which is AP Circular 54 of 2002 June, which says that any funds rendered surplus should be repatriated to India. Subject to, within that, they came out with 2007 for the IT companies. So the overriding obligation for garment manufacturers, if, as in this question, would be governed by 2002 circular, which says that any funds rendered surplus in the branch should be repatriated immediately to India. Now the question arises, surplus means what? So it would obviously mean net profits, because otherwise it cannot be surplus. But how do you determine, or when do you determine it is rendered surplus? Can we say that it is rendered surplus only at the year end? But then what about the future? It's not that I'm going to close business on 31st March. I need a buffer for the future also. So if I render all the net profit as on 31/3/14 back to India, how do I do business on 1st April? Then I have nothing left forward for that. So I think this is not a circular which is too happily worded, because otherwise, but you can keep some margin. So you may keep 15% cash balance, say, as surplus which is required. It's not actually surplus, but anything over and above normal surplus, you may repatriate back to India. That's one view, but there's no clarity on that. If you want to retain everything, I think it's better to get a clarification through your AD that I am allowed to keep everything. That's how I would look at it.
5.16 round tripping, I think we discussed this.
Covered that.
Yeah, so I don't think I need to get into that. None of these situations, 1, 2, 3 ways make a difference.
17 is an interesting question. Can I invest in a partnership or a proprietary concern abroad? SEMA 120 of 2004 allows a partnership or a proprietary to make an investment abroad in the foreign securities. And foreign securities in section 2 of SEMA defines securities to mean shares, capital, debentures, preference shares. So it means securities issued by a company. Can I invest in a partnership or a capital under the LRS scheme? Now LRS allows you any capital account or current account which is a permissible transaction. If you look at the capital account rules or regulations, Schedule 1 says investment in foreign securities. So again, that talks of securities of a company. I don't think you will use LRS for taking up a position in a partnership or a proprietary concern, because that is not a permissible capital account transaction, and therefore you would need prior RBI permission for that. So not on an automatic route, but with approval, yes, it's allowed.
Just before I go, just 5.17, I think you, apart from LRS, even under the outbound regulation, the amendment which came in 263, FEMA 120 amendment which brought in ODI for an individual, there they've used the word shares and compulsorily convertible preference shares. Correct. So that means the entity that they are envisaging is only a corporate entity and not any other form. So typically even LLPs will get ruled out to get partnership and proprietary forms. So that's where it is. Okay. Let's go to 5.18, remittance to third parties for incorporation. Now, yes, this is a very practical question. That means unless you've committed a capital, the company is not incorporated. You generally reserve a name and then you send the money for incorporation. I don't know what's the experience of the group here, but I do believe the bankers have been doing in many cases without RBI approval. You just say the company is under incorporation, you send the money, show the proof of the other name and everything allotted to you, send the money and get. That's why they give you a time of 6 months to bring the share certificate. So that's okay. I don't think this is a procedural matter that RBI or anybody would like to interfere with that. Whichever is the best option, either you open a bank account or that consultant creates a separate account which is a trustee account. You send the money, get the company incorporation done and get the share certificate within the prescribed time. I don't think this creates any other need to go to RBI for anything, and I think people have been doing it fairly.
the only suggestion here is that the invoice for the pre-incorporation expenditure should be in the name of the Indian party and not in the name of the to be formed foreign party. Then there have been instances where ADs have looked upon it as paying on behalf of someone and not going through the ODI route. So get the bill in the name of the Indian party, not in the name of the Dubai party as in this case, and then you don't pay on behalf of the Dubai party. That may be construed as a violation of section 4 of